it's fun to lose and to pretend she's overboard and self-assured. Oh no, I know a dirty word. Hello, 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 how low? Hello, 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 how low? Hello, 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 how low? Hello, hello, hello. With the lights out, it's dangerous. Here we are now, entertainers. I'm stupid and contagious. Here we are now, entertainers. Yeah, I'm worse at what I do best, and for this gift I feel blessed. Our little group has always been and always will until the end. Hello, 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 how low? 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 When the lights out, it's dangerous. Here we are now, entertainers. I'm stupid and contagious. Here we are now, entertainers. Everlado, Elvino, Mosquito, Maribino. Yeah. Hey, yeah. And I forget just what I taste. Oh yeah, I guess it makes me smile. I found it hard, it's hard to find. Oh well, whatever, never mind. Hello, 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 hello. Hello, 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 when the lights out, it's dangerous. Here we are now, entertainers. I'm stupid and contagious. Here we are now, entertainers. Everlado, Elvino, Mosquito, Maribino. Yeah. Well, she was just a girl. She expected the world, but it flew away from her reach. So she ran away in her sleep and dreamed of paradise, paradise, paradise. Every time she closed her eyes, dreamed of paradise, paradise, paradise. Street of paradise, paradise,
This is the rhythm of the night, oh yeah, the rhythm of the night. This is the rhythm of my life, oh yeah, the rhythm of the night. This is the rhythm of the night. This is the rhythm of the night. This is the rhythm of the night. Oh yeah, this is the rhythm of my life. This is the rhythm of my life. This is the rhythm of my life. Oh yeah. Oh, I can ease you of your pain. Feel you give me love again. Round and round we go. Each time I hear you say, this is the rhythm of the night. Oh yeah, the rhythm of the night. This is the rhythm of my life. Oh yeah, the rhythm of the night. This is the rhythm of the night. This is the rhythm of the night. This is the rhythm of the night. Oh yeah, this is the rhythm of the night. The night. Oh yeah, this is the rhythm of my life. Oh yeah, the rhythm of the night.
What is love? I don't know why you are not fair. I give you my love, but you don't care. So what is right and what is wrong? Just give me a sign. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. No, don't hurt me. No, no more. What is love? What is love?
Llévate la música a todas partes con Spotify Premium y conviértete en el alma de la fiesta donde vayas. Descarga el contenido que más te gusta y escúchalo sin conexión. Disfruta de 3 meses gratis antes de que se acabe la oferta. Cancelas cuando quieras. Toca el banner para ver más información.
But you did enough to cut me off. Make a like and then it happened and now we want nothing. I don't even need your love, but you treat me like a stranger and it feels so rough. No, you didn't have to stoop so low. Have your friends collect your records and I change your number. Guess that I don't need them now. Now you're just somebody that I used to know. You can let it go, and I wouldn't get you hung up as somebody that you used to know. Cut me off, make a like and then it happened and now we want nothing. I don't even need your love, but you treat me like a stranger and it feels so rough. No, you didn't have to stoop so low. Have your friends collect your records and they'll change your number. I don't need that now. Now you're just somebody that I used to know. Somebody, somebody, feeling my way through the darkness, guided by a beating heart. I can't tell where my journey will end, but I know where to start. They tell me I'm too young to understand. They say I'm caught up in a dream. Life will pass me by if I don't open up my eyes. Well, that's fine with me. So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I've been finding myself and I didn't know I was lost. So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I've been finding myself and I didn't know I was lost. Try carrying the weight of the world, but I only have 2 hands. Hope I get a chance to travel the world, but I don't have any plans. Wish that I could stay forever this young, not afraid to close my eyes. Life's a game that's meant for everyone, and
Well, love is the prize. So wake me up when it's all over. When I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I've been finding myself and I didn't know I was lost. So wake me up when it's all over. When I'm wiser and I'm older.
You were the shadow to my light. Did you feel us? Another start, you fade away. Afraid our aim is out of sight. Wanna see us alive. Where are you now? Where are you now? Where are you now? Was it all in a fantasy? Where are you now? We were only imaginary. Where are you now? Atlantis, under the sea, under the sea. Where are you now? Another dream. The monster's running right inside of me. I'm faded. I'm faded. So lost. I'm faded. I'm faded. So lost. I'm faded. Where are you now? Where are you now? Under the bright but faded lights, you've set my heart on fire. Where are you now? Where are you now? Under the bright but faded lights, you've set my heart on fire. Where are you now? Where are you now? Where are you now? Atlantis, under the sea, under the sea. Where are you now? Another dream. The monster's running right inside of me. I'm faded. I'm faded. So lost. I'm faded. I'm faded. So lost. I'm faded. So
Convierte tu pasión en un negocio con Shopify y bate récords de ventas con la forma de pago con mejor conversión del mundo. ¿Has oído bien? La mejor conversión del mundo. El increíble sistema de pago de Shopify facilita las compras en tu sitio web, en las redes sociales y en cualquier lugar. Eso es música para tus oídos. No le des más vueltas. Tu negocio será un super éxito con Shopify. Empieza tu periodo de prueba por €1 al mes en shopify.es/records.
¿Sabes esa sensación cuando estás haciendo un examen y te preguntan justo lo que has estudiado? ¡Buah! Está cremísima. Tanto como las nocilla cookies. Rellenas de cremosa nocilla. Están cremísimas. Nocilla cookies.
baby, this is what you came for. Lightning strikes every time she moves, and everybody's watching her. Baby, this is what you came for. Lightning strikes every time she moves, and everybody's watching her. Oh, just look at it.
There's a time that I remember when I did not know no pain, when I believed in forever. Hey, on the drum. Hey. ¿Qué será? Eso que huele tan. Yo no le doy falo, pero ella me sigue. Vive pensando que esto es un vacile, que los hombres estos son imbéciles y no hay quien la flecha, Cupido invencible. Ella aquí el canán, el Sauer con el Buchanan, Six Sauer y los palos de Canitán sonan como cuando la pongo a gritar del barco de atrás. Yo soy tu capitán. No quieren chularse, pero de mí tú te vas a enamorar. Y si me enchula la teta y el culo te mando a operar. Le gusta tomarse aderal, yo te voy a esperar. Frente del residencial, al frente del resi. Siempre un gol como Messi. Ya le di un par de veces y me di un par de besos chingando a la Bessie. Par de 3 analgésicos, Adderall y pasto. Desde que tengo el contacto te rapto. Sabes que pa' chingar yo nunca falto. Un polvo sin rastro, tato. Contigo es que tanto gasto. Y yo le propuse un trato, que al rato la busco y todo callado, que se quede en anonimato, que solo mirarme como me mira y me pone bellaco. Ella me te pila y corona tranquila con esos ojos, digo tato, tato, tato. Chingamos, nos acostamos, nos levantamos, volvemos, chingamos. ¿Dónde paramos? 28 gramos, en la cartera ferregamos. Ella aquí el canán, el Sauer con el Buchanan, Six Sauer y los palos de Canitán sonan como cuando la pongo a gritar del barco de atrás. Yo soy tu capitán. No quieren chularse, pero de mí tú te vas a enamorar. Y si me enchula la teta y el culo te mando a operar. Le gusta tomarse aderal, yo te voy a esperar. Frente del residencial. Y yo le propuse un trato, que al rato la busco y todo callado, que se quede en anonimato, que solo mirarme como me mira y me pone bellaco. Ella me te pila y corona tranquila con esos ojos, digo tato, tato, tato.
Año 2075.
La humanidad ha llegado al límite de almacenamiento.
Quiero un informe que convenza al mundo entero de que la decisión que tomemos es la buena.
¿Qué salvamos antes de que se queme la casa? ¿Los cómics o las fotos?
¿Los expedientes médicos o los penitenciarios?
Delete, un podcast de ficción de ING y Summer Story. Descúbrelo en las principales plataformas de audio y súmate al bienestar digital.
Vuelta a esos reencuentros, a ese sitio que te encanta, a ese concierto único. Momentos perfectos que formarán parte de tu memoria. Ven y saborea el tiempo junto a Schweppes y la música en directo de Micromambo y de Santero y los Muchachos. En Perrachica el próximo 25 de septiembre en los Perfect Moments by Schweppes.
Amo cuando tu silueta forma parte del mismo sol que ya me tapa. Me dice que me quiere pero no me quiere. Me pide que me quede mientras ella escapa. Tranquila, yo le llevo media hora. Media rola, me explota en media hora. 2 percos y tú me chingas como loca. 5 copas y se desborda la copa. Parece nena buena. Y si supieran tiene un corazón de piedra. En la nota es cuando más ella genera. Y en el tubo se menea a su manera. Ella está pa' los verdes, ¿me entiendes? Yeah. Sentí que yo no sé qué tú pretendes. Prende, sorprende. Estás bien bellaca, estamos a saloa. Me lo da y se desaloja. Estás bien perdida que lo voy a llegar a La Palma, a quiquear, a fumar, a chilear. Expectativa, por ti que ella se activa, receptiva. La autoestima por las nubes como rascacielos. China, media china, no hay vino, pero sé que te imaginas. Este bicho ahí tú encima, él mojándolo, bebiéndolo, mirándolo. Tú no irme tu verdad si te estoy dando yo. Tienes ego pero en tu cuarto falto yo. Tú no lloras, tú lo mandas por carajo. carajo del otro pa' después nada. Una diabla con un cortecito de mano. No te enamores que te sana. No te enamores que te sana. Tranquila, yo le llego en media hora. Media rola, me explota en media hora. Dos percos y tú me chingas como loca. 5 copas y se desborda la copa. Parece nena buena. Y si supieran tiene un corazón de piedra. En la nota es cuando más ella genera. Y en el tubo se menea su mano. Yeah. Se menea su manera. Se menea su manera.
No me digas que no quieres si tú no eres mía porque no se puede. Dímelo a la cara que prefieres que tu novio si se muere. Te lo mando a hacer collares con la serie. Ese como yo nunca la mueve. Para, ella nunca es Sara. Esa cinturita la hace más cara. Fendi no le gusta vestir de Sara. Con esa figura rompe la tara. Yo la veo. Y me acelero y me mareo. El viento bailando con su pelo. Cuando solo te imagino te deseo. Yo soy su voz. O dime y voy, no tengo rol. Si soy bandido la tengo encima, rubiano yo. O dime y voy, no tengo rol. Si soy bandido la tengo encima, rubiano yo. Yo quiero llevarte a París de paseo. Me puse en el WhatsApp pa' que iban los feos. Mi ángel me pide que si balanceo. 300 en el auto, mi carro europeo. Con motivo esta curva yo ni puedo ver. Estoy de casa con el catalán, le está con temer. Este palo es como un cocodrilo, requiere comer. No me digas que no quieres si tú no eres mía porque no se puede. Dímelo a la cara que prefieres que tu novio si se muere. Te lo mando a hacer collares con la serie. Ese como yo nunca la mueve. Para, ella nunca es Sara. Esa cinturita la hace más cara. Fendi no le gusta vestir de Sara. Con esa figura rompe la tara. Soy su voz. O dime y voy. No tengo rol. Si soy bandido la tengo encima, rubiano yo. O dime y voy. No tengo rol. Si soy bandido la tengo encima, rubiano yo. Y Sufian, oye, free el gato. Y Sufian, oye, free el gato. No me quiero a mí, no puedo pelear, no me quiero a mí. No puedo pelear, no me quiero a mí. No puedo pelear, no me quiero a mí.
Déjate liar con LG X-Boom La Bestia. Ahora con 1000 vatios de potencia. El altavoz más bestial de LG X-Boom ha llegado para liarla con su pantalla de LEDs personalizable. Envía mensajes y emojis, tu aliado perfecto para elevar la fiesta a otro nivel. Déjate liar con X-Boom La Bestia. Descúbrelo en lg.com.
Mira esa nena la que va bajando. Me gusta el cotejito que le está dando. Conmigo ella se escapó. Peligrosa como miró. Mira esa nena la que va bajando. Me gusta el cotejito que le está dando. Conmigo ella se escapó. Peligrosa como miró. La nena me sigue, la sensación del bloque. Yo quiero con ella hasta que la micro shote. Tú tranquila, la cuenta bajan a tope. Pide lo que quiera, que es lo que quiero yo es ponértelo. Chiquitita como Milo, se conecta como un pene, rentálalo. Conmigo ella se escapó, nena, dale, muestra todo. Y más, deja de llevar la discoteca, qué rica muñeca. Y más, deja de llevar en la discoteca, se puso coqueta. Mira esa nena la que va bajando. Me gusta el cotejito que le está dando.
chula de tus defectos, imperfectamente perfecto. Le contesto en todo momento, monumento a ese cuerpo más. Cuando vamos a vernos que el infierno está viniendo y me quiero morir viniendo, más metiéndote. Yeah. Tengo Mari Palizani, mami, yo vivo en party. Apuntame a la chora con mi pistola y dime papi. Siempre culto Illuminati y la Ducati, por mi amiga. No estés aquí, yo estés allá. Mami, tú estás clara que siempre te voy a clavar, que esto nunca va a acabar. Si yo siempre voy a acabarte, tú siempre vas a tenerme, yo siempre voy a tenerte. Tú siempre vas a llamar y yo voy a responderte. Bebecita, yo te lo dije, que yo siempre voy a ser el que te parte. Tu moralete y ella cariñe. Tú sabes que soy el uno y soy aparte. Y tú estás ricota, tú eres arte. Gustan los artistas y los gantes. Tú no estás cuando quieres, cuando tú quieres. Si el amor es de verdad, pues pa' que me hieres. Te doy todo lo que pediste, ¿qué más tú quieres? Con tu y eso pienso tanto, baby, que hasta me conformo. Con que tú me mires y me escuches. Me transformo cuando entro y dejo que me use. Me trastorno cuando no te siento cerca mío. Encima mío, me da escalofrío. En chula de tus defectos, imperfectamente perfecto. Le contesto en todo momento, monumento a ese cuerpo más. Cuando vamos a vernos que el infierno está viniendo y me quiero morir viniendo, más metiéndote. Yeah. Tengo Mari Palizani, mami, yo vivo en party. Apuntame a la chora con mi pistola y dime papi. Siempre culto Illuminati y la Ducati, por mi amiga. Perfectamente perfecto, le contesto en todo momento, monumento a ese cuerpo más. Cuando vamos a vernos que el infierno está viniendo y me quiero morir viniendo, más metiéndote.
Yeah. 4 AM por tu zona, a veces es cierto que tú eres el malo y yo solo soy el que miento. Si paso pa' su piel y se desmaya pa'l momento. Yo no cargo collares, no confío en los muertos. Con los trinos y los panteras te la hacemos como quieras. Te disparan los amiris que denuncian tu disquera. Haciendo los tratos en las mansiones de antequera. Te dejaron desvivido por una tipa la acera. DJ cuando yo lo vea necesario. DJ con la tola camino escenario. Doble G se he tirado por el armario. Visto dinero porque soy un ordinario. Guau, guau, ya no lloro. Hice desafines pero conseguí el tesoro. Soy un palestino pero con sangre de moro. Cuando me arrodillo solo a mí yo le lloro. Guau, guau, ya no lloro. Altas condiciones por eso yo me demoro. Chota, tú no me hables que contigo no hago coro. Estaba en la nevera pero sin canto a los loros. Paseo de tote con el humo por invierno. Me duele el cora, ya no puedo hacerme el tierno. Mora si pegamos yo igualito me mantengo. Pa' cuando ganamos no sepan lo que yo tengo. Preso a los 12 por eso ahora lo entiendo. Por un abismo me encuentro ahora cayendo. Gritando mi nombre pero yo no lo comprendo. Quieren toda mi alma pero yo nunca la vendo. Los trinos y los panteras te la hacemos como quieras. Te disparo los amigos que denuncian tu disquera. Haciendo los tratos en las mansiones de antequera. Te dejaron desvivido por una tipa la acera. G-Che cuando yo lo vea necesario. G-Che con la tola camino escenario. Doble G se he tirado por el armario. Visto dinero porque soy un ordinario. Guau, 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 ya no lloro. Hice desafines pero conseguí el tesoro. Soy un palestino pero con sangre de moro. Cuando me arrodillo solo a mí yo le lloro.
escuchando un palo global, dando un vuelto en el Panamera. Salgo pa' la calle a vacilar, lento la coges mami, te voy a dar. Tú conmigo viajando estos planetas, a ella le gusta aunque yo sea antisocial. Dile que lo de nosotros, nena, un día se murió. Dile que como yo, nena, él no te lo mete carón. Baby, dale, vente, quítate eso pa' tu ribudón. Dile que esta noche, mami, la hacemos en el balcón. Me gusta su corte, la amo al extremo. Yo sé que te gusta, en todas las poses lo hacemos. Nena, tú conmigo, viajando de terreno. Lo más que me gusta es que no envidia al ajeno. Me gusta su corte, la amo al extremo. Yo sé que te gusta, en todas las poses lo hacemos. Nena, tú conmigo, viajando de terreno. Lo más que me gusta es que no envidia al ajeno. Me gusta su corte, la amo al extremo. Me gusta su corte, la amo al extremo.
Lo que tiene, paso el tiempo contigo hablando y me dice que sola se entretiene. Se gana lo suyo, no le gusta lo de otros, sola se mantiene. Quiero olvidarme, pero mira que no puedo por lo que tiene. Lo que tiene. Podría escribirte todo un libro, pero no sería un cuento. No sé ni cómo escribirlo, malo pero lo lleva adentro. Me dice que soy aburrido, que yo no la llevo pa'l centro. No me gusta el atosigo, a solas disfruto el momento de lo que tiene y sí que tiene y va y se viene. Quieres dos nenes, una casa y un Mercedes. Aunque faene, no hay noche que no frene. No hay quien la llene si su corazón la radea. Lo que tiene, paso el tiempo contigo hablando y me dice que sola se entretiene. Se gana lo suyo, no le gusta lo de otros, sola se mantiene. Quiero olvidarme, pero mira que no puedo por lo que tiene. Lo que tiene. Otro día echándote de menos, porque de tu beso ya no puedo olvidarme. Y aunque no te diga mucho que te quiero, sabes que no duermo sin primero pensarte. Y yo sé que a veces no soy sincero, pero mami chula no quiero lastimarte. Sabes que lo nuestro es verdadero y tengo mis canciones para dedicarte. No sé lo que tiene que me tiene todo el día, pensando, soñando que eres mía. Cuando no te veo yo siento una agonía, como si estuviera posando en un policía. Y me dice que no ande con otra, si supiera lo que por ella haría. Y tu padre no te quiere conmigo, por eso que siempre nos vemos escondidas.
Modelo de pasarela caminando por la acera, todos la quieren mirar. Ella me pelea pero dice que no se la, pero yo no soy cualquiera y en la noche va a llamar. Messi Manela, oye soy una normal, tan ya panamera yo no la llevo a cenar. Flota por la arena con su cuerpo de sirena, dice conmigo se queda, yo no me dejo casar. Tú sin mí, ¿qué vas a hacer? Yo debo de aprender ahora estar sin ti, mujer. No veo el sol amanecer, puedo tocarte, entonces tú bórrame. No puedo soportarme, chao, pa' sentirme bien. No sé qué tiene, pero sus amigas le dicen que el Benny es un bandido y eso no conviene. Esa sabe que me cela, me paseo con la tola y eso le entretiene. Pero el Jacob no se enamora y eso le impresiona porque no se puede, como no se puede, como
Lo que tiene, paso el tiempo contigo hablando y me dice que sola se entretiene. Se gana lo suyo, no le gusta lo de otros, sola se mantiene. Quiero olvidarme, pero mira que no puedo por lo que tiene. Lo que tiene. Lo que tiene, paso el tiempo contigo hablando y me dice que sola se entretiene. Se gana lo suyo, no le gusta lo de otros, sola se mantiene. Quiero olvidarme, pero mira que no puedo por Soy de una peli enamorada de Lenny, amores no cree ni creerá. Corazón de piedra, sin miedo se pega, sin miedo y apunta y dispara. Donde pone el ojo pone las balas. Si es mala pues claro que es mala, si es cara pues claro que es cara. Vio la pistola y no se me asusta, pa' bellaquear conmigo se apunta. Quiere frontear con las vestijuntas, quiere gastar y me explota la funda. Gástalo todo, sé en tu sitio y se desacató. Se engatusó y el gato lo usó, mensaje en buzón lo hace bufón. Y ese toto te huele cabrón super clean. She's on my dick, haciéndole split. Hay par de tickets por party y split. Mándame el pin que yo sí tengo el key. No quiere que le enamore, no le falta nada en el banco. Tú no le estás dando flores, ya lo que quiere es un cuarto. En 4 por medio le canto, respeto sin miedo le falto. Y el gato en el bus mucho pasto, se olvidó del S en el acto. Subí de una peli enamorada del genio, amores no cree ni creerá. Corazón de piedra, sin miedo se pega, sin miedo y apunta y dispara. Donde pone lo pone las balas. Si es mala pues claro que es mala, si es cara pues claro que es cara. Gástalo todo, sé en tu sitio y se desacató. Se engatusó, el gato luce, mensaje en buzón lo hace bufón. Vio la pistola y ya no se asusta, pa' bellaquear conmigo se apunta. Quiere frontear con la vestijunta, quiere gastar y explotarme la funda. Ella me hizo un hiki, no es celo, es que es piqui, friki. Me reza flow tiki, Mickey, güey, yo no atupé jugando tu que de 3 en 3 y se le eché. Parrachao, yo te parraché con mi teacher, la diabla se fue. Se fue, se fue, se fue, se fue, se fue, se fue. Se fue, se fue, se fue, se fue. Se fue, se fue, se fue, se fue. Volvió y se fue, pero sé que va a volver. Se fue, pero sé que va a volver. Se fue, pero sé que va a volver. Se fue, pero sé que va a volver.
Disfruta al máximo mientras escuchas música con Spotify Premium. Un no parar de canciones al alcance de la mano y sin anuncios para que puedas darlo todo. Únete ahora y disfruta de 3 meses gratis. Cancelas cuando quieras. Toca el banner para ver más información.
Fumando en el sí, pensando en ti, mami. Me siento bien solo si no estás tú. Let me see, ese booty. Hoy what you wanna do? Baby, what you wanna do? Me tienes bella aquí, te extraño contigo playing. Tirarte en la table y ponerte en fall. Mi amor, a ti a tu sexo miss you.
Wey, ¿dónde estás? Chingame como si mañana me muriera. Estoy pa' ti, no hay otra más. Todos los días encima te tuviera. Sí, tú no eres cualquiera y yo me lo como cuando quiera. Estos trillis pendientes a la oportunidad. Ciego por ese culo más que rico está. Wey, ¿dónde estás? Chingame como si mañana me muriera. Estoy pa' ti, no hay otra más. Todos los días encima te tuviera. Sí, tú no eres cualquiera y yo me lo como cuando quiera. Estos trillis pendientes a la oportunidad. Ciego por ese culo más que rico está. Anoche contigo tuve un déjà vu. Tú saliendo del baño apagando la luz. Qué rico mami te huele a champú. Dos bellacos tenemos similitud. Chingamos pa' jodernos la salud. Me envía fotos sin filter. Te ves más linda sin highlight. Mami yo te pongo en foal. Después te haces la C9. Dando una vuelta por Maya. Cazuleando por el westside. Siempre que le llegue midnight. Chingamos hasta que salga el daylight. Wey. Le gustan mis temas, dice que son himnos. Uno cuando llegue, otro pa' despedirnos. Chingamos como si ambos fuéramos a morirnos. Me dice te amo antes de venirnos.
¿Dónde estás? Chingame como si mañana me muriera. Estoy pa' ti, no hay otra más. Todos los días encima te estuviera así. Tú no eres cualquiera y yo me lo como cuando quiero. Estos trillis pendientes a la oportunidad. Ciego por ese culo más que rico está. Me mando una foto de espaldita en la playita y una gotita de sudor bajándole por la rayita. Ay, qué rico quemadita, también sudadita. Y el traje de baño marcándose en tus tetitas. Te cambié los gustos, ahora te gustan los cagos. Que te digan mami, te va a empezar el susto. Si es que sacarle el rajo. Yo te quiero pa' serio y hablar con tu pai y decirle que tú eres mi side. Pero si me ven tanto sé la que hay. Mejor chinguemos escondido por ahí. Yo no soy un hijo de puta, solamente la como. Cuando te lo metas se siente tan perfecta. Tú y yo tenemos historia, eso nadie lo borra. Baby, no hay otra que como tú me corras. Si quieres te llevo para atrás el tiempo en el DeLorean. Y pregunta por tu novio y me dijeron que sos un bobo. Mata, está muy dura para estar con un tipo tan flojo. Ella no me pide nada, pero yo le voy a dar todo. Ella sí la cojo porque yo le voy a dar donde no le da el sol. La llevo pa' Miami o pa' Nueva York. Más te ves bien, pero conmigo te verías mejor. Yeah. Y yo le voy a dar donde no le da el sol. La llevo pa' Miami o pa' Nueva York. Más te ves bien, pero conmigo te verías mejor. Yeah. Pero si fuiste mía, ¿acaso se te olvida? Mami, vente pa' refrescar tu mente de cuando te lo ponía. Ay, qué rico sabía cuando te la comía. Yo quiero verte, volver a tenerte. ¿Dónde carajo estás metida? ¿Dónde carajo estás metida? Bebé, baby, tú has sido mis mejores polvos. Ella se soltaba el moño y me chingaba como una actriz porno. Todo el mundo diciéndome que tú no me convienes, pero yo haciéndome solo si alguien te toca la forma. Yeah. Después de chingarme tan rico, no desearte ser el colmo. Porque tú no coges un viaje pa' donde mí sin retorno. El mundo es redondo y ya mismo yo vuelvo y te lo pongo. Oh. Pero si fuiste mía, ¿acaso se te olvida? Mami, vente pa' refrescar tu mente de cuando te lo ponía. Ay, qué rico sabía cuando te la comía. Yo quiero verte, volver a tenerte. ¿Dónde carajo estás metida? Cabrón, ya tú sabes los flavors. Siempre estamos aplicándola. Nunca barquillando, cabrón. Au. Porque yo le voy a dar donde no le da el sol. La llevo pa' Miami o pa' Nueva York.
Puedes darle vueltas una y otra vez a la misma playlist o prepararte para la vuelta a precios de Black Friday. Sí, con el Black to School de MediaMarkt, adelántate ya y consigue las mejores ofertas en todo lo que te puedas imaginar. MediaMarkt, 25 años siempre listos. Haz clic en el banner y aprovecha el Black to School.
Baby, rola un bate y ya voy por ti, más prepárate. Hoy quiere que se la saque sin tocarla, el todo le late. Quiere que como puta la trate, Yo vamos a darte esa pussy. Apaga la luz, sube la music, el toto rosita tusi. Esa baby es exclusiva, es una bellaca, la boca le escupí en la cama, no una rookie. Antes de hacerlo prendemos un cuchipalo. Monchi el sushi, toma un par de pesos y vete para la Gucci. La nena no sale del beauty, está crecida desde que se hizo la teta y el booty.
puti. Le pregunté si se va toda, dice que se atreve. Que si me voy a venir que adentro yo se lo deje. Que no es celosa y peleando por otras mujeres. Un hija putita es lo que tú eres. Cuando está bellaca me llama y le caigo. Moña pa' quemar siempre le traigo. Y siempre me la engancho cuando salgo. Pero eso es por si algo, eso es por si algo. Baby, enrola un bate y ya voy por ti, más prepárate. Hoy quiere que se la saque sin tocarla, el todo le late. Quiere que como puta la trate, Yo vamos a darte esa pussy. Apaga la luz, sube la music, el toto rosita tusi. Esa baby es exclusiva, es una bella que a la boca le escupí.
Quiere que la trate como puta, ella quiere alcohol y juca. Que la boca le escupa y se lo ponga en la ducha. Como tú no hay mucha, el totito rosa fucha. Sabes que soy el demon, chingando soy el que escucha. Se moja con baby de Lunay. Un modelito de mora, en el DM me pide un ride. Cuando me ven las motoras, baby, vámonos. Sobran las pacas pa' costearte, baby, cómo no. Chinga conmigo hasta en el carro, no dice que no. Cuando está bellaca me llamo y le caigo. A tu noviecito hay que matarlo. Se quita los panties en el Lambo. Baby está chingando con un diablo. Baby, enrola un bate. Quiero verte nua dentro un yate. Tengo diamante en el pate. En el mar en negro mate. Quiere que como puta la trate, Yo voy a moverte esa pussy. Apaga la luz, sube la music. El toto rosita tusi. Esa baby es exclusive. Es una bellaca, la boca le escupí. El demon.
Baby, enrola un bate y ya voy por ti, más prepárate. Hoy quiere que se la saque sin tocarla, el toto le late. Quiere que como puta la trate, Yo vamos a darte esa pussy. Apaga la luz, sube la music, el toto rosita tusi. Esa baby es exclusiva, es una bella que a la boca le escupí en la cama, una.
So great. So now that we have the interface here, now, in order for us to figure out if the amount of Ethereum sent with a transaction is greater than or equal to our minimum USD of $5, we need to convert the And that's it for this section. You've learned a ton of incredibly powerful features in Solidity, so let's do a quick recap of what we learned this section. We learned that with the new keyword, we can actually deploy contracts from other contracts. We learned that we can actually import other contracts, which is essentially the same as copy-pasting the code into this file. We also learned this thing called named imports, which is going to make you look even better than most of the Solidity devs out there. We learned that we can interact with other contracts so long as we have the address and the ABI. The simple storage type automatically comes with the address. ABI, so we can just access it like this. We didn't learn too much about the ABI, but we'll learn more about it later. We learned that if we want to make a child contract and inherit the functionality of some other contract, we can just import that contract and then use the is keyword in the contract declaration. To override a function, we need the override keyword, and we need the base class or the parent class to have the virtual keyword on the function you want to override. And that is the end of this lesson. So be sure to give yourself a huge pat on the back. Take a break. Breaks are good for your brain. Go for a walk, grab a coffee, get some ice cream. Go tell your friends, go post on Twitter. You're getting more and more advanced with Solidity very quickly, so be sure to celebrate the little wins, to keep being excited and keep that curiosity. Congratulations, you've completed this lesson. Our Remix Fundme. And once again, you can find all the code associated with this lesson in the GitHub repository associated with this course, and also web3dev.education. And let's do a quick walkthrough of these contracts before we actually start coding anything to see what we're going to be doing. We're going to be creating one contract, fundme.sol. We're also going to have another file called priceconverter.sol, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The fundme contract is going to be our main contract. This is going to be an example of a crowdsourcing application or a way to raise money. You can think of it as a Web3 decentralized Kickstarter. We'll allow users to send Ethereum, Polygon, Avalanche, etc., or really any native blockchain cryptocurrency into this contract and allow the owner of the contract to actually withdraw all the funds for them to go spend on their new project. And we are going to actually deploy this contract to a testnet. And remember, use the testnet transactions sparingly. But if we deploy this to a testnet, we scroll down, we actually see that we have a couple of buttons and a new color button. We'll actually get a new red button for our fund function. A red button indicates that a function is payable, and we can send native Ethereum or Polygon or Avalanche or whatever the native cryptocurrency of the blockchain we're working with is. We additionally will indicate a minimum USD amount to send to the contract. So funders have to spend at least $5 worth of Ethereum in order to call this fund contract. So if we go up to the value section, we can actually send some value with this transaction. And again, don't worry about this making sense yet. But if I want to send 0.01 Ether, I'll grab that amount in Way, paste it into the value section here. I'll scroll down, I'll hit the fund button. MetaMask will pop up. I'll confirm. We can see at the top, the current balance of the contract is 0. And we'll wait a little bit for the transaction to finish going through. And after the transaction finishes going through, we can see in Etherscan, we have a balance of 0.01 ETH. And we can also see that after remix, after a slight delay. Then we can allow the owner of the contract to withdraw those funds. Right now, the owner of the contract is also us. And after this transaction goes through, we'll see that balance removed from the contract and it'll go back into our wallet. And as you just saw there, if we held our MetaMask up for long enough, eventually it would pop back into our MetaMask. Are you excited? Well, you should be. Because after you complete this section, you'll actually know most of the fundamentals of working with Solidity. We're going to be going over a lot of advanced features in this section. And I'll let you know the specific parts that you don't need to fully understand quite yet. There's going to be a couple parts where if it doesn't totally make sense, just keep going with the course. And as we get later into the course, you'll figure out why they make sense. But it might be a good idea to write down the questions that you have to ask either an AI on the GitHub discussions or web3education.dev. Make sure, of course, to use the discussions tab in the Foundry full course F23 to ask questions and interact with other developers who are taking the same course. Or go to web3dev.education to learn more. All right, let's get froggy. So the first thing that we want to do is let's once again delete everything in our remix so we can start from scratch. So I have the contracts that we're actually going to be building in here. You might have the simple storage, the add 5 extra, the storage factory, etc. Let's go ahead, right click and just delete everything. We're going to start completely from blank here. So let's go ahead and delete everything in here. All right, great. So let's go ahead and start creating our contract. We're going to call it fundme.sol. One thing that's really good when you actually start building any code at all is to first write down what you want it to do. So what do we want ours to do? We want to get funds from users into this contract, withdraw funds to the owner of the contract or whoever has created this FundMe contract. And then we also want to set a minimum funding value in USD. We don't want people to be able to donate just a penny. So let's go ahead and set this up. SPDX, license, identifier, MIT, we'll do Pragma, Solidity, caret 0.8.18, contract, FundMe. Let's go ahead and delete these comments. So before we embark on writing all of our functionality out, let's just write down the functions that we want to build. So we're probably going to want a function fund, which is going to be the function they call to send money to our contract. We're going to want a function withdraw, which is going to be the function that the owner of the contract is going to use to withdraw the money that the funders send us. And those are going to be the two main functions that our contract is going to need. We're going to be implementing more functions than just this, but these are going to be the main functions to interact with our protocol or interact with our FundMe contract. Let's comment out withdraw for now and just start focusing on fund. We want anyone to be able to call this fund function. So we're going to make this public. And we want this function to do what? Well, we want it to allow users to send money, and we want to have a minimum dollar amount that they have. To send. So the first question we need to answer is, how do we send ETH to this contract? How do we have it when a user calls the fund function, ETH automatically gets sent into our contract? Whenever we send a transaction on the blockchain, there's actually always a value field that gets populated. And most of the time it gets sent with 0. Even before, when we called the send function between our accounts, when we added an amount in our MetaMask, this amount value populated the value field of our transaction. This value field is the amount of native blockchain cryptocurrency that gets sent with every transaction. The first thing that we need to do to allow a function in Solidity to accept this native blockchain currency in the first place is to make the function payable. It's this payable keyword that makes the function look red in the Remix UI. Just like how wallets can hold funds, contracts can actually hold funds as well. So whenever you deploy a contract similar to a wallet address, it actually acts almost the same as a wallet address. You can send money to it, you can interact with it, etc. And like we did in the demo, you'll see this contract actually gain a balance, just like a wallet. You can access this value amount of a transaction using one of the globals in Solidity called message.value. Solidity has a number of these globally available keywords and functions, and you can find these in the Solidity documentation. One of them is message.value, which is the number of way sent with the message. If we wanted users to be required to spend at least one whole ether with this fund function, we could use something called require to do so. In order to do that, we would add this line, require message.value is greater than 1E18. And there's a couple of things to unpack here. 1E18 is equal to 1 ether, which is equal to 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or put another way, it's equal to 1 times 10. Raised to the 18th. In Solidity, a double asterisk or double multiply sign is how you do a power or an exponent. This value here is the value in way of 1 Ethereum. In your smart contracts and at the lowest level, this is how they process numbers in this giant way format. So if we wanted people to be forced to send at least 1 whole ETH with this fund function, we would just say require message.value is greater than 1E18. You can use something like ethconverter.com to see convert 1 ether between ether, way, and gwei is actually another value in between ether and way. And we saw gwei actually when we saw gas costs. Normally gas costs are shown in forms of gwei. This required keyword is a checker. It's basically saying, hey, is message.value greater than 1E18? If not, then revert this transaction. And if we want, we could add a little revert message. We could say like, didn't send enough ETH. We can actually deploy this. We can actually compile and deploy this on a Remix VM. Deploy, scroll down, and if we hit fund, and if we pull up our terminal, we hit fund, we actually see we get this little X here, meaning our transaction didn't go through. And if we hit the drop down, well, again, same thing. We know that this error is because we have this require statement in here, and our transaction is reverting or not going through. So we know that with this transaction, we need to send at least 1 ETH or 1E18 way worth of ETH in the value section of our transaction. So if we scroll up, we can actually just change the unit to ether, put 1 in here, scroll down, and now if we hit fund, oh, it doesn't go through because we have strictly greater than. So excuse me, let's do 2. Now I'll scroll down, we'll hit fund, and we get a green check mark, and we see the fund me balance actually has improved to 2. If we update the value to 2 again, and we scroll down, we hit fund again, we see our transaction went through, and we have 4. If we try to do less, like let's change this to way, and we'll do 1,000 way. Scroll down, we hit fund, up, it fails because 100 way is less than 1E18 way, right? Because 1E18 way is this much way. So obviously 1,000 or however much I put in is much less. So this require says, if this first section is false, then go ahead and revert with whatever this second section is. Reverts can be a little bit confusing and a little bit tricky. So what is a revert? A revert undoes any actions that have been done previously and sends the remaining gas associated with that transaction back. So what does that actually mean? Well, let's say, for example, in our FundMe contract, we have a uint256 public my value, and let's have my value initialized to 1. Now in our fund function, let's say my value equals my value plus 2. So every time this fund function successfully goes through, we add 2 to my value. However, if we get to a revert statement, even though we added 2 to my value previously, Since our contract reverts, this would actually revert this action or reset it back to its initial state. So if this transaction reverts, my value would go back to 1 or whatever it was previously. If we compile FundMe, we delete our previous deploys. We're on the Remix VM. We'll deploy FundMe. We'll scroll down. We have my value, which defaults to 1. If we call fund right now without any value, if we pull up our terminal, we can see the transaction failed. My value is still 1, even though this line technically executed. This line executed, but then this line hit and it reverted what was done here. So if we scroll back up though, we go to Ether, we'll put 1 in for now, scroll back down. Now we'll hit fund. Oh, needs to be more than 1, excuse me. We'll add 2 here, scroll back down. Now we'll hit fund. That transaction did go through, which means my value will now be equal to 3. And again, if I set value to 0, we call fund, it reverts, so my value is still 3. So then the question might be, oh, well, did we spend gas to do this if my transaction didn't even go through? Well, unfortunately, the answer here is yes. If you send a failed transaction, you will spend gas because computers executed this line and then they executed this line and just failed. So users can actually specify how much gas they send with every function. Let's say there was a ton of computation after this require line, we would need to send a ton of gas to operate and run our fund function. However, once it gets to this require line and it reverts, however much gas that we sent to execute the rest of the computation would just get refunded to whoever initiated the transaction. Like I said, sometimes the refunds and some of that can be a little bit confusing. So again, for now, just know that if a transaction reverts, it undoes anything it does previously, and you can consider the transaction failed. However, if you send a reverted transaction, you will still spend gas. But okay, let's delete this value for now, delete it from the global scope, and delete some of these like that. In fact, every single transaction that we send will have these fields. It'll have a nonce, or the transaction count, the account, the gas price, the gas limit that we've seen on Etherscan, a to, aka the address that the transaction is sent to, a value, which is going to be this amount that we're talking about. We'll also have data, which is going to be what we send if we make a function call or deploy a contract. And then it'll have this VRS components. We're not really going to go over these VR and S because this is that cryptographic magic that's happening when a transaction is signed, but just know that that's in there. For sending value, we can populate some of these fields. The gas limit, for example, is populated to 21,000. Data is going to be empty, and then that to is going to be the address of the transaction we want to send to. For a function call, we can also still populate the way that we want to send. So we can call a function and send a value at the same time. In Remix, it has a little drop down here for way, Gwei, Finny, and Ether. We're going to ignore Finny for now, but of course we have our way, Gwei, and Ether again, where 1 Ether is worth this much Gwei and this much way. So right now our contract is pretty minimal, right? We're requiring the message.value is greater than 1 whole Ether, but we want to actually require that it's less than some value. Like, let's say we want to have users spend a minimum of $5 as opposed to 1 whole Ethereum. So let's first specify that $5. We can do that at the top of our contract. We'll say uint 256 minimum USD equals 5. And we'll make this public instead of internal. We'll update this minimum USD in the future to make this more gas efficient. So what we want to do is we want to require that our fun function requires that the message.value is greater than, let's say greater than or equal to minimum USD. However, minimum USD is in terms of USD or dollars, and message.value is in terms of ETH or way in terms of Ethereum. So how do we convert the amount of Ethereum to its price in dollars? This is where oracles and Chainlink comes into play. The dollar price of an asset like Ethereum is something that we've assigned to Ethereum outside of the blockchain in the real world. So in order to get this abstract concept of the price of the native cryptocurrency of the blockchain we're working with, so we need to use a decentralized oracle network or something called an oracle to get this price. So before we keep going, let's learn a little bit more about decentralized oracles, Chainlink, and how they work so that we can understand how to get the price of Ethereum into our smart contracts. As we've talked about, blockchains are deterministic systems, which means that they themselves can't actually interact with real-world data and events. They don't know what the value of an Ethereum is. They don't know what random numbers are. They don't know if it's sunny outside. They don't know the temperature. They don't know who's president. They don't know any of this information. These blockchains also can't do any external computation. Maybe you have some amazing artificial intelligence model that you want to integrate with a smart contract. Smart contracts by themselves can't do anything with that. As we've mentioned, this is because blockchains are deterministic by design. This is so that all the nodes can reach consensus. If you start adding variable data or random data or values that return from an API call, different nodes could get different results and they would never be able to reach a consensus. This is known as the smart contract connectivity problem or the oracle problem. And this is bad news because we want our smart contracts to be able to replace traditional agreements. And traditional agreements need data and they need to interact with the real world. So this is where Chainlink and blockchain oracles come into place. A blockchain oracle is going to be any device that interacts with the off-chain world to provide external data or computation to smart contracts. However, the whole story doesn't even end there. If we use a centralized oracle, we are reintroducing a point of failure. We've done all this work to make our logic layer decentralized, but if we get our data through a centralized node or through a centralized API, or we decide we want to make the API call ourselves, we are reintroducing these trust assumptions that we've worked so hard to get rid of. We're essentially ruining the entire purpose of building a smart contract. So we don't want to get our data or do external computation through centralized nodes. Those are bad news. Chainlink is the solution here. Chainlink is a decentralized oracle network for bringing data and external computation into our smart contracts. As we mentioned before, this gives rise to these hybrid smart contracts, which combine on-chain and off-chain to make incredibly feature-rich, powerful applications. Chainlink is a modular, decentralized oracle network that can be customized to deliver any data or do any external computation that you like. So, for example, a lot of people say, oh, I can just make an HTTPS call to some API and we'll be good to go. The blockchain nodes can't make these HTTPS calls because they wouldn't be able to reach consensus. If they called the node at different times or they did something else, all the consensus would be broken. So instead, we need a decentralized network of Chainlink oracles to do this. And then in the transaction, this network of nodes will return the data to our smart contracts for us. Now, Chainlink networks can be completely customized to bring any data or any external computation that you want. However, doing the customization can be a little bit extra work. There are a ton of Chainlink features that come out of the box completely decentralized, ready to plug and play into your smart contract applications. What are those features? The first one is going to be Chainlink data feeds, and that's the one we're actually going to be using for our application here. Chainlink data feeds, currently at the time of recording, are powering over $50 billion in the DeFi world. The way they work is a network of Chainlink nodes gets data from different exchanges and data providers and brings that data through a network of decentralized Chainlink nodes. The Chainlink nodes use a median to figure out what the actual price of the asset is and then deliver that in a single transaction to what's called a reference contract, a price feed contract, or a data contract on chain that other smart contracts can use. And then those smart contracts use that pricing information to power their DeFi application. We can see an example at data.chain.link. And you can change networks, you can change price feeds, you can change a whole bunch of different information to see some of the most popular price feeds. Let's look at ETHUSD, for example. On ETHUSD, we can see this whole network of independent Chainlink node operators that are each getting different answers for the price of ETHUSD. They're getting aggregated by the network and then delivered on chain. We can see how often they're updated. These ones are updated for a 0.5 deviation threshold or a few hour heartbeat, whichever one hits first. We can see when the last update was, we can see the number of Oracle responses, etc. We can see the contract address directly on chain. We can even look at the contract on Etherscan. We can see some of the history. We can see all the responses of the different oracles. And then at the bottom, we can see the different users and sponsors keeping this network up. Similar to transaction gas, whenever a node operator delivers data to a smart contract, the Chainlink node operators are paid a little bit of Oracle gas in the Chainlink token. Right now, these users of the protocol are sponsoring keeping these feeds up and are paying the Oracle gas associated with delivering this data on chain. Here's an illustration of what the current model of these data feeds look like. A network of these Chainlink nodes each reaches out and gets the information about an asset and then signs the data with their own private key. In a single transaction then, one node will deliver all the data with all the different signatures to a reference contract. If that node doesn't deliver the data, another node will send it instead. Reputation is incredibly important when you're a Chainlink node operator. If you miss data updates, if you forget to send transactions, you'll probably be quickly kicked off these networks and have no chance of making any more money in the future. These data feeds are used by some of the largest protocols in the space, such as Synthetix, SushiSwap, Compound, and Aave, with several $1 billion each. We can take a look at an example over at docs.chain.link. Now, the docs are probably going to look very different by the time you actually start looking at them because they change the docs pretty frequently. So an easy way to get started here is maybe go to docs.chain.link and then over either on Developer Hub or Overview, go to Data Feeds. And this is where you can see most of what you need in the Getting Started section of the documentation. And we can see an example of an entire contract that uses and reads from one of these Chainlink price feeds. We can even open this up in Remix and work with it in Remix. It looks like this example is reading from a price feed on Kovan. The reason we're actually going to use a testnet to see this work is that there's a set of Chainlink nodes monitoring the test network to show you exactly how this works out. Once we get deeper into the course, we'll show you how to actually run tests and work with Chainlink nodes without actually being on a testnet, which will make your development much faster. But I highly recommend walking through this section along with me so that you can see firsthand how this actually works. So let's go ahead to faucets.chain.link/Kovan. We're going to switch to the Kovan. We're going to turn off test link. We'll go and deploy this on Injected Web3. And again, the reason we're going to use Injected Web3 instead of JavaScript VM is that there's no network of Chainlink nodes watching our little fake JavaScript VM. There are a network of Chainlink nodes watching the testnet. So we'll scroll down, we'll switch contract to the price consumer v3, and we'll hit deploy. MetaMask will pop up, and after a brief delay, we can see our price feed consumer down here, and we can hit get the latest price, which shows us the latest price of Ethereum in terms of USD. You may be wondering why the number looks so weird. That seems like a really large number for the price of Ethereum in terms of USD. And this is because decimals don't actually work so well in Solidity. And we'll get to that in a little bit. There's a decimals flag associated with this price feed address that tells us how many decimals to include with this price. It's also in the documentation. However, I know that this one has 8 decimals. So this is saying the value of Ethereum right now is $3,262. It may, of course, be different when you go ahead and try this. Now, there's a number of things that happen in this contract that I'll explain in our FundMe example, but if you want to take a look now and see if you can figure out what's going on, I recommend you do so. Price feeds are one of the most powerful, out-of-the-box, decentralized features you can use in your smart contract to level them up, especially for decentralized finance. If you're looking for different addresses of different price feeds, you can check the contract addresses section of the documentation, choose the network that you want, and then scroll down and then look some of the different addresses of the different price feeds. For example, this address will give you the price of 1 ETH token in terms of Ethereum. Anymore, is it? So we need a way to get a provably random number by looking outside of the blockchain. And oracles are perfectly positioned to do exactly that. Chainlink verifiable randomness function is a way to get provably a random number into our smart contract to guarantee fairness and guarantee randomness of applications. Many protocols like Pool Together, Axie Infinity, EtherCards, Aavegotchis, and more use Chainlink VREF for lotteries, for randomizing NFTs, for gaming, and for more. We're going to do an example of Chainlink VREF in a later section once we get to the lottery section. If you want to see if you can play with the randomness yourself right now, I recommend you going to docs.chain.link, EVM chains, and scroll down to get a random number. And this will teach you how to get a provably random number into your applications. The next decentralized out-of-the-box feature of Chainlink is Chainlink Keepers, which is decentralized event-driven execution. As you've seen, in order to kick off some type of transaction, somebody needs to spend the gas and somebody needs to sit down and hit the go button or hit the transact button or hit the send button. This is obviously a centralized vector if you have a decentralized application that needs to run at specific times or after specific events are triggered. Chainlink Keepers are the solution to this. Chainlink Keepers are Chainlink nodes that listen to a registration contract for different events that you specify to fire. Maybe you say every 10 minutes you want to do something, or once a week do something, or if the price of some asset asset hits some number, or maybe a liquidity pool is at a certain level. Whatever event that you want to code, you absolutely can. The Chainlink nodes constantly listen for these triggers to happen and check the different contracts for these triggers. Once a trigger Now, I know we haven't actually written that much code, but we've gone over a ton, so I want to do a quick review. In order for a function to receive native blockchain token like Ethereum, you need to mark that function as payable. If you want to force a transaction to do something and you want it to fail if that wasn't done, you can use a require statement. A transaction that reverts means it undoes any work that it did previously and returns any gas to the user. To get the value sent with a transaction, you can use the Solidity global message.value. Chainlink is a technology for getting external data and computation into our smart contracts. And most importantly, getting that data in a decentralized context. In this example, we're going to be using a Chainlink data feed or a Chainlink price feed, which is a decentralized way to get pricing information from real-world assets into our smart contracts. Now, in order for us to figure out if the amount of Ethereum sent with a transaction is greater than or equal to our minimum USD of $5, we need to convert the amount of Ethereum into its value of dollars. So how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to get the price of Ethereum or Avalanche or Polygon or whatever native blockchain token that we're working with. So let's create a function to do that. We'll create a function, get price, and this function is just going to get the price of Ethereum in terms of USD. And then we're also going to create a function called get conversion rate, which is going to convert a value to its converted value based off of the price. For now, we're going to make them both public functions so we can play with them, test them, and do whatever we want with them. To get the price of Ethereum, we're going to use a Chainlink data feed, and we can go through the documentation to get that information. And just know in the data feeds documentation, the feeds addresses has now its own section, price feed addresses. You can scroll down in here, go to Ethereum, and then just look for Ethereum Sepolia for Sepolia. So in the documentation, I'm going to scroll down using data feeds. They've got an example here, right in Solidity. And if you wanted to, like I said, you could easily open this up in Remix. Now you can see this example in the documentation, what's actually going on when we're working with a Chainlink price feed. There's a contract out there at an address, and we're going to call this latest round data function on that contract. It gives us a whole bunch of data, but we really only care about the price. So we're going to want to do the same thing. We want to reach out to that contract that's currently storing and having the price updated. So since we want to reach out to and work with the contract, we're going to need two things, right? What are those two things? Well, we need the address and we need the ABI. The address of the contract is going to be really easy. We can get the address by going to the Chainlink documentation, and let's go to this price feed addresses section. So now that we're at the docs, we're going to go ahead, we're going to go back to the feeds addresses, price feed addresses here, and we're going to scroll down. And once again, we can see in Sepolia testnet, we can see the ETH USD address down here on the Sepolia testnet. So now that we have the address, how do we get the ABI? Well, before with Simple Storage, we imported the entire contract from the top and we compiled and we got the ABI like that. We could do that here, but that's kind of a lot of code and we don't actually care about what the whole contract looks like. We only really want want to know what the functions are, so we can call that latest round data function. Remember, if we're on Remix and we go down to the compilation details, the ABI is really just this list of functions that we can call on a contract. The ABI itself doesn't actually need to include any of the logic. It just needs to say, hey, these are the functions you can interact with, and here are their inputs, and here's whether or not they're payable, and here's whether or not they're view functions, etc. Like I said, though, this kind of is a white lie. You can also use a function selector or some other ways, but we're just going to ignore that for now. How can we get the ABI? There's a concept in Solidity known as the interface. If we go to the Chainlink GitHub, we go to Smart Contract Kit/Chainlink, we can see a lot of the different contracts in the Chainlink repository. We can go to contracts. Now, depending on when you watch this location might be a little bit different. Be sure to use the GitHub repo to get the most up-to-date edition. So we're going to go ahead and scroll down to src/v08. We're now going to do shared. It was previously in this interfaces folder. We do shared interfaces, and we're going to grab the aggregator v3 interface.sol. If we scroll down, we can actually see a whole bunch of function declarations, but none of them are actually implemented. It's just function. The name of the function, some stuff, external view, blah, blah, but then just the semicolon and nothing inside of them. This is what's known as an interface. If you compile this, this will actually give us that ABI because it defines all the different functions that you can call on a contract. It just doesn't have any of the logic. Again, we don't really even need to know what the functions do. We just need to know how to interact with the contract. And if a contract is deployed, it'll have that logic in its deployment. So what we can do is we can copy this. This whole thing, scroll all the way to the bottom, pasted code alert comes up. Since we're only working on testnets here, we're going to be okay that we don't. I'm about to show you an easier way. Just follow along and watch. Now that we have this interface, aggregator v3 interface, we can use this interface to make API calls because now we have the address and we have the ABI. And we can even compile this and it'll compile fine. So we can say aggregator v3 interface at address this, and the combination of these two give us whatever code is at this address with all the functions from the aggregator v3 interface. And just to test this out, we could do something simple like .version, since if we scroll up, it looks like there is indeed a version function. Put a little semicolon at the end. So let's actually go ahead and actually copy this line, give it its own function called getVersion. This will have this public view returns. What is the version up here return? A uint256. We'll have a return a uint256. Paste that line in here, aggregator v3 interface at its address, .version. We'll say return all of that. Now I'm going to go ahead and deploy this to the Sepolia testnet just to show you what this would actually look like. However, I'm going to recommend you don't do that for now. Just know that this will work. This way you won't have to wait forever for your transactions to go through on the testnet. So to do this, I'm going to go ahead, scroll up to the top, go to injected MetaMask, change the contract from aggregator v3 interface to fundme. I'm going to go ahead and hit deploy. My MetaMask is going to pop up. I'm going to go ahead and hit confirm, and we're going to scroll down. And now we have a big blue button called Get Version which I'm going to go ahead and click, and we can see we get a 4 return because at this contract address on the blockchain, it has the functionality for get version returning 4. And for the rest of this lesson, I'm going to be showing you guys and testing this on an actual testnet. However, I recommend that you don't test all of these as I go along. Just watch me do them because, again, waiting for transactions on a testnet can be really annoying. Sometimes the testnet might be having issues because, again, it's people running them out of the goodness of their heart. So for this lesson, just follow along, write the code with me, and then maybe at the end, deploy everything. So this is a really easy way and a common way that people use to interact with other contracts. Outside of their projects. They get the interface of that contract using the interface keyword. They compile it, and the compiler actually gives us an ABI. And then you just wrap an address around with that interface keyword, and you can call any function at that address. And this is one of these things, as we work with more and more, it'll start to make more sense. In the beginning, it might be a little hard to grasp, but just bear with me for now. The more we do it, the better you'll get. Don't get discouraged. Take a deep breath and exhale, and let's keep coding. Friends, but one we could ask here is, hey, I'm confused. How does the Solidity function return the value 4 when I didn't define any logic in aggregator v3 interface? And I just posted that code from get version here because a common issue that I see new developers run into is they go, oh, wait, how does this version return 4? My aggregator v3 interface doesn't have any code in it. Why does putting an address in here make it work? Like, what's going on? And let's see if our AI is able to help us here. So this is ChatGPT version 3.5. Again, I prefer version 4, but this is the cheaper one. And it says, in the code you provided, the get version function is calling the version function of an instance of the aggregator v3 interface contract. It appears that the contract address here is being used to create an instance of aggregator v3 interface. The aggregator v3 interface is an interface contract that defines a set of functions that must be implemented by another contract. It serves as a way to interact with the contract at the given address by providing a common interface. The version function being called in your code is likely defined in the actual contract that implements this function, or all the functions in this aggregator v3 interface are at this address. If this address doesn't have a version function, this would just break. And this is a good example of, again, where we can actually follow up with these AIs. They're typically very good at keeping context. So we could even ask, what would happen if that contract address didn't have that function? And we see if the implementation contract at the given address does not have a version function, or if it has a different function signature, calling version on the contract would result in a compilation error or a runtime error. So it wouldn't result in a compilation error, but the transaction would revert. So this is pretty helpful here. But again, we always want to double check this. So this is where we'd probably go back to the discussions forum and follow up there. So now that we actually have the interface, we can start calling these functions and calling these addresses. However, having a ton of these interfaces is really going to clog up our contracts and clog up our files and be really gross to work with. Is there a better way for us to do this? Well, when we worked with Simple Storage, yes, there was. We just went ahead and used imports, right? But that's when we had all the code locally in our directory. We don't have all the code locally. We didn't create the aggregator v3 interface. We didn't create the price feed contracts. So can we do something like import simplestorage.sol, but with a contract outside of our project? Well, again, we could copy paste it to its own file and import aggregator v3 interface.sol. And of course, we're going to use this named import syntax because we're awesome developers. We could copy paste it like this and do exactly what we did before. We could create a new file called aggregator v3 interface, paste the code in there, or we could actually import directly from GitHub. If we go back to the documentation associated with using data feeds, we scroll down to using data feeds here, scroll down, we see at the top, they do this import like this, import at chainlink/contracts, src, blah, blah, blah. Now, if you look at the top of the documentation, this link here, this import aggregator v3 interface from chainlink contracts, src, v08, shared interfaces, blah, 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 this might actually be different than what we show in the rest of the video. Just for you, be sure to use whatever the documentation says and whatever we have in the GitHub repo associated with this course. So in this video, we might actually use Chainlink Contracts SRC v08 interfaces, aggregator v3 interface, and we skip over the shared, but you should just use whatever the documentation says and whatever is in the GitHub repo associated with this course. As of now, we're going to use this line with this shared keyword. So just keep that in mind when we're going along with this. This import actually has the same setup as the path of what's in the GitHub repository. So instead of us copy pasting from GitHub, we can actually import directly from GitHub or NPM. We can copy this line known as a package manager, and it keeps it, which is created from the GitHub. So great. So now that we have the interface here, which will give a minimalistic ABI for us to interact with the contract, how do we actually get the pricing information? Well, again, if we go back to the docs, we can see right here, it gives us an example of the code we can use to get the latest price. But let's write it ourselves just so that we know what's going on. We'll say aggregator v3 interface, and we'll actually create a new variable called price feed equals aggregator v3 interface contract at this address, which again only works for Sepolia. Now we can call this latest round data function on the price feed. So we'll say price feed dot latest. Round data. And if we look at the interface on GitHub, we can actually see latest round data doesn't just return one variable, it returns a whole bunch of different types of variables. And to return multiple types, we do some syntax that looks like this, and we'll say uint 80 round ID, and you can even flip back and forth. We know an int defaults to an int 256, and then uint 80 answered, capture them and leave the commas in there. Warnings, but we're going to fix them in a minute. Now we have int price equals price feed. 256 is going to return a number that looks like this because, again, Slitty doesn't work with decimals. So we know that this price feed has 8 decimals, but it'll get a return like this. Boom, like this. It'll return a value that looks like this. If we want to double check how many decimals there are in a price feed, it actually has a decimals function, which will allows you to check that as well. Now, as we know, message.value is going to have 18 decimal places. How do we know that? Well, because we know that 1 ether is equal to this many way, and this many way has 18 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this massive number is equal to 1 Ethereum, right? 1.12345678910 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So right now, message.value and price actually have different decimal places. Price has 8, message.value is going to have 18. So to get them to match up, we have to do return price times 1e10, or to add those additional 10 decimal places. And yes, I know we have a red line. I'll fix this in a minute. Price, as we know, is a int 256, and message.value is going to be a uint 256. So the types are actually different. So we want to get the price in terms of uint 256 instead of int 256. To convert them, we can again do a thing called typecasting. There are a lot of different types that can be easily converted between each other. Not all types can be typecasted, but an int and a uint256 can be. So to make our price a uint256, we would just do uint256 and wrap price like this. Or we could just wrap both of them like this. Now, of course, since we're not modifying any state, but we are reading storage, we can make this a view function, and then we'll say it returns a uint256, like so. And now, if we compile, we get rid of all those errors and warnings. Now, math can be a little bit tricky in Solidity, but the more you do it, the better you'll get. And the reason math can be tricky is because there aren't any decimal places, so you need to only work with whole numbers. The more you work with it, the better you'll get, though. Awesome. So now we have a get price function, which is going to return the value of Ethereum in terms of USD as a uint256. Now, all we have to do is convert our message.value in terms of dollars using this get price function. To do that, we're going to use our get conversion rate function. This get conversion rate function is going to take a uint256 ETH amount as an input, and we're going to convert this ETH amount to its value in dollars. This will be a public view function that will return a uint256. So first, we're going to get the price of Ethereum by doing uint256 ETH price equals our get price function that we just defined. And then we're going to do uint256 ETH amount in USD equals ETH price times ETH amount and then we actually have to divide by 1E18. The reason we divide by 1e18 is because both of these have 18 decimal places. And if we multiply 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, if we multiply these by each other, where both of these are representing 1, we're actually going to get a number that's absolutely massive with 38 decimal places. So we need to divide by 1e18 to reduce it back down to what it should actually be. An important rule with working with math and Solidity is you always want to multiply before you divide. The reason for this is since, again, only whole numbers work in Solidity, if you were to do 1 divided by 2, you would end up getting 0. So you always want to multiply first. When we get to the Foundry section of this course, testing all this math is going to be a lot easier. If you're really struggling with some of the math bits right now, I wouldn't let that slow you down because one of the things that AI is really good at is doing a lot of these math conversions. But in any case, this ETH amount in USD is the number that we're looking for. So we can say return ETH amount in USD. And awesome, now we have a get conversion rate function. Let's walk through this together just so that you can understand what's actually going on. Let's say we want to see how much 1 is. We just divide. It's not possible to have. That's why go ahead and keep going. So now that we've done all this work, if we want to make sure that our users are sending at least $5, we can do get conversion rate of message.sender needs to be greater than minimum USD because get conversion rate takes an ETH amount as input, uses the pricing information to get the dollar value back, and we're going to check to see that the dollar value of the message.value is greater than the minimum USD. However, they deploy this, go ahead and confirm. After a long delay, we'll get our 1 testnet just to demonstrate this working, but again, you do not have to. So we're going to go ahead, delete minimum USD to say 5 times 10 raised to the 18th. Or we could also do 5e18, or we could do 5 times 1e18. I personally like this 5e18 syntax, but whatever works for you. I'm going to deploy this to a testnet just to demonstrate this working, but again, you do not have to. So we're going to go ahead, delete our previous USD. However, since get conversion rate returns a value with 18 decimal places, we need to update our minimum USD. As input uses the pricing information to get the dollar value back, and we're going to check to see that the dollar value of the message.value is greater than the minimum USD. However, since get conversion rate returns dollars, we can do get conversion rate decision, which is really good. So normally we should test this function before continuing, but since we're doing all this on a testnet, and I promise you that I tested this all beforehand, we're just going to go ahead and keep going. So now that we've done all this work, if we want to make sure that our users are sending at least $5, we can do get conversion rate of message.sender needs to be greater than minimum USD, because get conversion rate takes an ETH amount as input, uses the pricing information to get the dollar value back, and we're going to check to see that the dollar value of the message.value is greater than the minimum USD. However, since get conversion rate returns a value with 18 decimal places, we need to update our minimum USD to say 5 times 10 raised to the 18th. Or we could also do 5e18, or we could do 5 times 1e18. I personally like this 5e18 syntax, but whatever works for you. I'm going to deploy this to a testnet just to demonstrate this working, but again, you do not have to. So we're going to go ahead, delete our previous deployments, injected Web3, deploy, MetaMask pops up. I'm going to go ahead and confirm. After a long delay, we'll get our deployed contract here. We have all this stuff. We can call get price, and we can see the value of Ethereum right now is this with 18 decimal places, which is awesome. So it's around $1,896. So if I were to try to fund this with maybe 100 Wei, I know for a fact that 100 Wei isn't going to be enough. So if we call this fund function, we're actually going to get this gas estimation failed. Gas estimation error failed with the following message, blah, blah, blah. Error, execution reverted, didn't send enough ETH, which is actually exactly the error message that we have here. It's exactly what our error message is here in our require, didn't send enough ETH. So if we try to fund it, we're going to get didn't send enough ETH. And this gas estimation failed is a pretty common error that you'll see in Remix and Solidity and EVM in general. It's kind of just the boilerplate answer for something went wrong. Luckily, we got the actual error message here so that we could debug, here's what's actually going on. Now you see here, we could still send this transaction. Like I said, we would actually spend gas to send a failed transaction. And this isn't something that we want to do, so we're going to go ahead and cancel. However, if we did send maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if we go to Google, actually, we can even see like an ETH to dollar conversion rate. So if we sent 0.01 ETH right now is worth $18. It might be different depending on when you actually do it. So we send 0.01 ETH in our remix, and we can do that by doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 1E16, and we hit fund now. We actually see MetaMask pops up. We don't get that gas estimation error. We can go ahead and confirm, and we can see that our function is working as expected, which is great. It's reverting transactions that have less than $5, and it's letting transactions go through that have at least $5. Awesome. And if we select minimum USD, we can obviously see that here. And we can see we have 0.01 ETH here. Fantastic. And since we don't have a withdrawal function here, we actually can't pull it out, which is another reason why I say, hey, maybe don't test this right now. But great, we've confirmed our get conversion rate is working. So let's move on. Fantastic. So what's the next thing that we should do in this contract? Well, we probably want to keep track of the users who send us money in this contract. So we can keep an array of addresses called funders and keep updating that depending on who actually sends us money. So up at the top, we'll make an address array or an address list. We'll make it public and we'll call it funders. And anytime somebody sends us money, we'll say funders dot push message dot sender, like message dot value. Value, message.sender is another global variable we can use in Solidity, which refers to whoever called this function, the sender of the transaction to this contract. So if we're on Sepolia and we initialize a transaction from our MetaMask, the message.sender is going to be this account right here. And then maybe we want to even make a mapping of addresses to make it easier to look up how much money each funder has sent. So we'll make a mapping of an address to you went to 256, we'll call it public address to amount funded. Now, something that's newer in Solidity is you can actually name the types in your mapping. So you could say address funder mapped to UN256 amount funded. Usually this is what's known as a little syntactic sugar. It's just to make it easier to read what this mapping is, right? Funder to amount funded. And then our variable name is very explicit, address to amount funded. Now, if somebody funds our contract, we'll of course do address to amount funded, the message.sender's address plus equals whatever they previously have funded plus message.value, whatever they're additionally adding. All right, great. And now we have a way for us to keep track of funders sending money to to our contract and have an easy way with a mapping to look up how much they've spent in total. Now, I know we've gone over a lot of advanced Solidity here, so let's do a quick refresher of what we've learned so far. Whenever we interact with a contract, we always need the address and the ABI. Compiling an interface allows us to get that ABI very easily for us to interact with another contract. When we combine the contract address with the interface, we can easily call the functions on that contract. Chainlink price feeds are an easy way to get data, especially pricing data, from the real world into our smart contracts. When working with math in Solidity and the EVM in general, decimals don't work. So we need to always make sure we're using the correct number of units whenever we interact with our contracts. Message.value and message.sender are known as globally available units in Solidity, and they refer to the sender of a message of the current call or the number of ways sent with a message or transaction. There's a whole bunch of these, and you can view them all in the Solidity documentation. Conversion rate. So we can create our own custom function with any type. So we could work with getConversionRate as if message.value was a class or an object or a contract that we actually created. To do this, let's go back to our files, create a new one called priceConverter.sol. And this is going to be a library, a price converter library. So how do we create a library? And we'll give it a version to fundme.sol. I'll zoom out a little bit. We're going to grab getPrice, getConversionRate, and getVersion, delete them. Well, I hit copy first, go back to price converter, paste them in here, and work with them in here. Of course, we're going to need the aggregator v3 interface. So we're going to go back to our fundme. We're going to copy this named import from aggregator v3 interface, paste it in at the top here, hit Command S, and we're going to go ahead and compile this successfully. Fundme is no longer going to compile, but we're going to fix that in a little bit. Now, the first thing that we're going to need to do in here is make these all internal. So we're going to say internal like this. We do internal get conversion rate and internal get version. Now that we have our price converter library, we can actually import it back in our fundme and attach it to a uint256. And let's actually delete this aggregator v3 interface line for now. And we'll do import price converter from /price converter.sol. And now to attach the functions in our price converter library to all uint256s, we'll say using price converter for uint256. Of course, if we compile our fundme, we're going to get an issue because it doesn't really know what get conversion rate is. So for now, let's actually just comment out this line. I'm going to remove these comments up here as well. So what we can do now, though, is we can do message. So price converter for functions have to be marked internal. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to fundme.sol. I'll zoom out a little bit. We're going to grab get price, get conversion rate, and get version, delete them. Well, I hit copy first, go back to price converter, paste them in here, and work with them in here. Of course, we're going to need the aggregator v3 interface. So we're going to go back to our fundme. We're going to copy this named import from aggregator v3 interface, paste it in at the top here, hit Command S, and we're going to go ahead and compile this successfully. Fundme is no longer going to compile, but we're going to fix that in a little bit. Now, the first thing that we're going to need to do in here is make these all internal. So we're going to say internal like this. We're going to do internal get conversion rate and internal get version. Now that we have our price converter library, we can actually import it back in our fundme and attach it to a uint256. And let's actually delete this aggregator v3 interface line for now. And we'll do import price converter from price converter.sol. And now to attach the functions in our price converter library to all uint 256s, will say using price converter for uint 256. Of course, if we compile our fundme, we're going to get an issue because it doesn't really know what get conversion rate is. So for now, let's actually just comment out this line. I'm going to remove these comments up here as well. So what we can do now, though, is we can do message.value dot get conversion rate. Get conversion rate. And in your library, whenever you're working with a library, the first input variable for a library is going to be the type that you're using with the library. So message.value is of type uint256. So this gets passed inside of get conversion rate as the first variable into uint256 ethemount, even though we don't pass any variables inside of these parentheses here. For get price and get version, we don't really care to have an input parameter at all. So it'll pass it in, but not do anything. So now, instead of require get conversion rate of message.value, we can actually do, let's uncomment this line now, and let's delete this line. We can actually do message.value.get conversion rate. Conversion rate. And now, if we compile this, this is going to compile successfully. This works because we're attaching the price converter library to all uint 256s. So now all uint 256s have access to this get conversion rate function. And since message.value is a uint 256, it can call .get conversion rate and it'll pass itself, so that message.value as the first input parameter to the function here. If we wanted another variable in here, like uint256 something else, that would be the first parameter inside these parentheses. So maybe like 123 or something, right? This 123 would be the something else, but message.value would still be the initial parameter, which in this example would be ethemount. So let's go ahead and undo that, and undo that. But all right, great. We've moved a lot of the math into our own library. Congratulations. Nice work. One of the most common libraries that was used for a long time was this library called safemath.sol. And in your Solidity journeys, you'll probably see it pop up from time to time. Now, we're going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here about SafeMath and the library SafeMath. And this is an excerpt from my course last year. So you might see stuff like Rinkeby and some other stuff, but just focus on the SafeMath stuff. Just know when we refer to the JavaScript virtual machine, that's talking about the Remix virtual machine. One of the most common libraries that was used for the longest time was this library called safemath.sol. And you'll probably see it a lot of different places. We're going to go off on a quick little tangent here and teach you about SafeMath. So let's close FundMe and close Price Converter. And let's create a new file called safemath.tester.sol. And let's start with some basic stuff in here. SafeMath was all over the place before version 0.8 of Solidity, and now it's almost in no contracts. What happened? Why is SafeMath no longer used as much? Well, let's create a sample contract. This is a section that you don't have to follow along if you don't want to code along with me, but if you want to, you absolutely still can. This is going to be a contract we are going to deploy on a JavaScript virtual machine. We can use any version of Solidity before version 0.8 of Solidity. So, for example, we'll use Pragma caret 0.6.0, and we'll create contract safe math tester dot 8. And if I were to contract on this concept of being unchecked, which means that if you passed the upper limit of a number, it would just wrap around and start back from the lowest number it could be. So if I call add a whole bunch more times and hit big number, now it's 8. If I were to hit this add button a ton more times and get it back to 255, it would then continue to wrap over to 0. So one of the most popular libraries that was out there was this SafeMath library, which would basically check to make sure that you weren't wrapping around a uint256 or an int256. Basically, it was a way to say, hey, you've reached the max this number can be, and now your transaction is going to fail. If we switch this to 0.8 of solidity, delete the old contract, we'll go switch this to 0.8, we'll go ahead and compile it, and now we deploy this to a JavaScript VM. If I hit big number, we get 255, but if we hit add, it actually fails, and we still get 255. In version 0.8 of Solidity, they added this bit where it automatically checks to make sure if you're going to do what's called overflow or underflow on a variable. We can actually revert back to the unchecked version by using an unchecked keyword. So if we wrap this big number equals big